Hello and welcome to the Federal. You're watching a very special series of interviews which we are doing for a very important occasion. And I am Nilanjan Mukhopadhyay, your host for this series. 100 years ago, exactly in September 1925, the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh was formed on the day of Vijay Dashami, that is Dashera, for other parts of the country. From now onwards till next year, September, October, whenever Vijay Dashami is going to be, the RSS is celebrating this as its centenary year. Now, as an organization which has actually survived 100 years but also played a very important role, quite often negatively, in Indian politics, both in the pre-independence period as well as in the post-independence period, including being charged of grave violence, including the assassination of Mahatma Gandhi. In the last 11 years, we have seen that the RSS influence over the government and over policies and placements, the two P's which I talk about all the time, that programs, policies, and placements to take over all institutions, the RSS has greatly emerged. So we need to talk about and take a very dispassionate look without any bhakti bhav about the entire RSS and what it is all about. We have broken up this special series into different aspects, and today I will be talking about the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh and the freedom struggle of India, or the national movement of India. Was the RSS any part of it, or was it completely out? Now, I'm going to be talking to this the very eminent historian, Mridula Mukherjee. Most of you would be knowing Mridula Mukherjee, so I will not really have to give a very elaborate introduction, except saying that she used to be the director of the Nehru Memorial Fund at one point before it became, museum and library. Yeah,
Right.
sorry, yeah, museum and library. My slip. And she was also the professor of the Center for Historical Studies at the Jawaharlal Nehru University. So, welcome to the program, Professor Mridula Mukherjee. It's really wonderful to have you and talk about something which is such very crucial. Now, in my introduction, I talked about 1925 and the establishment of the RSS. Now, it is not that the RSS suddenly got established and the idea came one bright morning into the minds of KB Hedgewar, and he contacted a few of his friends and they all got together and established it. There had been a certain process of development of anti-colonial ideas from the 19th century. By and large, a large number of historians, and other people who have studied Indian history and politics have said, that the anti-colonial thought which was emerging from the late 19th century in the early decades of the 20th century had two different streams. One was which eventually got articulated as the mainstream national movement, which was very inclusive in character, decided to take all the people along, and looked at the British as the colonialists of this country and had to fight the British imperialism. That is why the national movement developed. The other set of people, they looked at the anti-colonial movement as much, being the residue of colonial period for a much longer period, very clearly defined from the early 11th century with the advent of Mahmud of Ghazni, and continuing till the 18th century when Ahmad Shah, made his last, invasion of India. That is the period when they saw it was the Muslim colonial period. After that was the British period. So the real anger of this lot was against the Muslim colonialists of the country and their people who were left behind, that is the Muslims. Now, this was a very complicated articulation. Nonetheless, it became a strong enough idea to lead to the formation of the RSS in 1925. We all know that the people who were instrumental, Keshav Baliram Hedgewar, prior to that, he was inspired by Vinayak Damodar Savarkar's treatise Essentials of Hinduism, which later on was re-christianed as the Hindutva, the Who is a Hindu? That is the way it was done. Now, how, as a historian, how would you explain to people what I was trying to say? Two different ideas of anti-colonial thought, different view of what they looked at as the nation, and who all were actually part of this agitation. That is what I want to understand from you, from the perspective of the formation of the RSS in 1925.
Well, Nilanjan, let me first of all say that I do not agree with the formulation which you have put forward that there were two streams of anti-colonial thought.
Okay.
The stream of thought or approach which resulted in the formation of the Hindu Mahasabha, the RSS, the Muslim League, was not an anti-colonial stream at all.
Right.
In fact, I would say that communalism, whether it is Muslim or Hindu or Sikh or whatever, on which these organizations were based, the idea of communalism was a colonial construct.
Okay.
And they are therefore descendants, intellectual descendants of a colonial point of view and not of an anti-colonial point of view. That's
Okay.
my very clear understanding, and I'd
Okay.
like to state that up front. I think the only
Right.
people who have a claim to the anti-colonial stream are those who, whether they were in the Congress or whether they were socialists or communists or whatever, were people who actually fought against the British, the colonial power. It's no point having an ideology of anti-colonialism when you don't fight the colonialism which is actually occupying you. There's no point having some notion of colonial rule in the past, 1,000 years or whatever, when it doesn't lead you to actually fighting what colonialism you're faced with. So that means you don't actually consider the British as a colonial power.
Right.
You only consider your past dead and gone Mughal emperors and sultanate and all that as colonial, which is very convenient. So
Yes.
you don't have to fight anyone, except then that you fight their descendants who have
Hmm.
nothing to do with that colonial
Right.
so-called descendants. And descendants are descendants by virtue of religion. So anybody who's a Muslim becomes a descendant of Aurangzeb and Kutubuddin and Iltutmish and
And
you know
Babur.
whoever else you don't like, you know, and Gori.
Babur ki aulad has been one of the
Which
main
is
campaign
absurd.
slogans.
But any notion of descendant has to have some notion of a bloodline.
Right.
Descendants, if they were Afghans, then you could say the Afghans who are still identify themselves as from Afghan descent, they are descendants. Those who
Mhm.
still identify themselves as being from Iran originally, they are descendants. But there's a huge lot of Muslims in India, the vast majority of Muslims have no such claim and no such identification of being descendants of any people who came from abroad. So how do they become descendants of the conquerors? The only descendant part is that they have belonged to the same religion. This is ridiculous. So any Muslim in the world then should be a descendant of the Mughals, which is again absurd, isn't it? We don't say the Arabs are descendants of the Mughals, do we?
Mhm.
So I think one has to sort of sort these things out a bit. And I would say very clearly that, there was a clear stream of anti colonial thought which started emerging, in fact, from the 1840s in Maharashtra. The
Mhm.
early ideas about the drain and exploitation were actually there before the revolt of 1857. We
Mhm.
find these in early Maharashtra thinkers. But from 1860, 1870, with Dadabhai Naroji, Gokhale, R. Sida, G.V. Joshi, and the lot, Rana Day, there's a very clear cut body of thought and writing and research which emerges, which is clearly identified as a critique of colonialism
Right.
or British colonialism. It's as clear a critique as Lenin's comes later, or of Hobson, which we identify
Mhm.
as a critique of imperialism. So that stream of thought then leads to the mass phases. Because once you identify the enemy, once you identify the oppressor, then it's a matter of time before organizations emerge and propaganda happens, and the idea spread in society. And so we come to the 20th century, where through the Swadeshi movement days and then through Gandhi, these become mass phenomenon. So we come into the 20s. But that's a very clear cut, different stream, I would say. Right.
Okay.
So I would not say that there were two, and one was the Congress and all that, anti-colonial, and the other was these. They may
They
like
call
to call
themselves.
themselves
Yes.
Hindu nationalists. The Muslim League also in the 40s started to call itself a Muslim nationalist, not before that. It is when they started asking for Pakistan, then it became Muslim nationalism. Before that, it was only fighting for Muslim interests. Hindus, but you see here, because they were not asking for a separate country, no, they were asking to be dominant in India.
Right.
They wanted Hindus to be dominant in India and Hindu nationalism to be the dominant ideology and not Indian nationalism. So the struggle is between a conception of Indian nationalism and a Hindu nationalism, which we call communalism. Because
Right.
our
Right.
understanding also is very clearly that in a multi religious country, any notion of nationalism which does not have space for all religion, in a multi-caste country, a nationalism which does not have space for different castes, in a multilingual country, a nationalism which does not have space for different language groups and like different culture groups, in a diverse country with different ethnicities, if you don't have space for tribal people, then that is no nationalism. And Indian nationalism, by virtue of its nature, has to be inclusive, otherwise, it's not Indian. You cannot camouflage Hindu nationalism as Indian nationalism simply by saying Bharatiya is a Hindi translation of Indian. Which is the RSS, Savarkar from time immemorial have been trying to confuse the people of India by saying, we only mean Indian, we don't mean Indian, we mean Hindu, Hindu is equal to Indian, Hindu is equal to Bharatiya. I mean, come on, get your act
Everybody is a
together.
Hindu in this
I
country.
mean, the people of
That's
India are
also
not
this.
fools for the last 100 years to not know what you're talking about. By simply obfuscation of words, you can't actually get away with the reality, which is Hindu Rashtra. You can't at the same say
Right.
that our aim is Hindu Rashtra and say Hindu means Indian and we include Muslims in it also and Christians in it also. And then don't call it Hindu. Why is it necessary to call it Hindu then? Why don't you go for a word which is acceptable to everybody? It's as simple as that. you know
Right.
so this obfuscation we have to be very careful about. We have to
Right.
be very clear that the streams are very different, their politics is very different. See, the moment, it is not an accident that Savarkar, after being an ardent anti-imperialist nationalist, after having
Exactly.
actually organized and participated in anti-colonial action such as the shooting of cousin Wiley, I think it was, where
Yes, causes
probably
one.
that finally he got, and spending time in the Andamans
And
and
also
writing
being
for,
involved with Madanlal Dhingra in London.
yeah, that's right. So through
Hmm.
after that whole phase, it is not surprising that once he gives up that anti-colonial nationalism and actually becomes an ideologue of Hindu communalism, he also becomes pro-imperialist. He
Right.
never again participates, take parts in, leads, organizes any anti-British movement.
Right. He, in
It's
fact,
not an
sides with
accident.
the British.
I'm trying to say this is not an accident. These are the logical conclusions of your ideology, because communal ideology in India had to be loyalist. So whether you were a Jinnah, or whether you were a Savarkar, or whether you were a Munje, or whether you were a Hedgewar, if you were a communalist, you had to be loyalist. That's the logic of your politics. And that logic pushes you in that direction because you are born out of a colonial ideology. Communalism was a creation of the British, the ideology and the politics. In the late 19th century, what were the British doing after the revolt of 1857 when they thought Hindus and Muslims have got together? First, they tried to divide them by separating the two, by turning against the Muslims. Then, after a couple of decades, when they saw that it's the Hindu middle classes among whom the new ideas of anti colonial nationalism are emerging, they changed track completely and said, no, it's the Muslims who will be the bulwark of empire. And you started the Muslim and Anglo-Oriental College, which resulted in the Aligarh University. You brought the Muslim League into being. You patronized the Jagirdars, the Nawab, the Aga Khans, and built them up
And
slowly as
yes,
alternatives.
yes.
Then you brought in separate electorates to divide the people. People wouldn't even vote together. So what I'm saying
No,
is communal ideology and politics is a
yes.
direct product of colonial rule,
Very well
colonial
said. And
thinking and colonial politics.
I
And we
would.
cannot understand either RSS or Muslim League or Hindu Mahasabha unless we understand this link.
No, I know, and you are absolutely correct, that you have always disputed this coinage of this word Hindu nationalism, because according
Yeah.
to you, you have long maintained, from the time that we have interacted over more than almost 2 decades now, uh, that they cannot, just calling themselves Hindu nationalists does not make them a nationalist. They were communalists. You are very clear that they are not. But 1925 is the period,
And if I may
when the
just interrupt you,
yeah,
I am following in the tradition of our freedom struggle.
yes,
I
absolutely.
am following in the tradition of Gandhi, of Nehru, of Maulana Azad. They did not accept these people as nationalists.
Right.
They were squarely called communalists. And I think it's
That's
great
true.
advantage to continue to do so.
That's true. Now, 1925, when the RSS is established, that is the time when also that the national movement is after the high of the non-cooperation Khilafat movement, post Chauri Chaura and the post opposition over Khilafat from certain sections. It is going through a period of trying to look what has been achieved and where it needs to go. So by the time, so there is a certain amount of overlapping between various organizations. We find that the RSS volunteers, are sent, they appear as volunteers during various, Congress sessions, but no official role at all is there. But when Gandhi launches the Dandi March and then it leads to the civil disobedience movement, the RSS is absent from that, in sense that it does not be part of that. The call given, for Purn Swaraj, does not really resonate within the RSS literature or their statements of that time. They say that, okay, 26th November, we will, in 1930, we will mark, but we will not hoist the flag which the Congress is
26,
doing it. But
26 January.
26, no,
January.
26
At that time
January.
it was
Sorry. 20, I got confused between the day of the
with the
adoption of the
Constitution date.
Constitution. Just
Yeah.
a slip of my
Yeah.
tongue. 26 January. So they said
Yeah.
that we'll be hoisting a saffron flag. And
Yeah.
when eventually the civil disobedience movement starts, Hedgewar sets aside, resigns, puts somebody else there in charge of to take care of the RSS, and starts a parallel movement called Jangal Satyagraha. They say that this is our freedom struggle. This is what we are also doing, and claim that they too were part of the national movement. How do you look at this, to their claim that this was also national movement?
Yeah. So let's look at that early period. Firstly, I would like to,
Yeah.
just remind ourselves that in the period that we're talking about, 1925 RSS is established. And by 1930, when the period that we are talking about, when the Dandi
Right.
March, civil disobedience starts in April of 1930, the RSS is still a very small organization.
Very small, yes.
It's barely there in a few places in Maharashtra. And even the spread in Maharashtra really occurs after this period, So we are talking about not a very big organization, not a very important organization, not a very well-known organization. However, from the point of view of the politics of the RSS, it's still important to understand why they are doing what they are doing. I think, Hedgewar himself had a past in the Congress.
That's right.
He had been a congressman. In the
And disagreed
non-cooperation,
drifted apart because of the Khilafat movement.
Whatever be the reason.
Yeah, because of the
Whatever
support
the
given
reason,
to the
there
Khilafat.
could be many reasons, his ideological whatever. I mean, there could be many reasons for that. I don't think the Khilafat was the only reason for the setting up of the RSS. I think RSS in many ways,
Many other reasons.
Hindu Mahasabha was already there after all.
Yes.
And Munje, who was very important in the Hindu Mahasabha,
Was also playing a part in the
My
establishment of
my
this.
understanding, the RSS, setting up of the RSS, which is, we must understand, RSS was not set up as another political party.
No.
Okay, I think we need to make this clear to our viewers. RSS was meant to be like a volunteer, almost half secret, militant wing organizing the youth in some kind of bands and all that, to provide a kind of support to the political party, which was the Hindu Mahasabha. Correct. And this idea, I think, very clearly of setting up an organization like RSS did come from the Nazi and fascist sources. Later, it becomes very clear when Munje goes and meets Mussolini and goes and sees those organizations in 1931 and very consciously talks about building the RSS on those same lines. But I think even earlier, the whole idea of setting up this organization was not as an alternative to the Hindu Mahasabha. Okay. The ideological framework was the same. Munje was behind it. Savarkar was very much involved, though he could not come out openly because he was under restraint in
Because of
Ratnagiri
the
district.
yes.
The British had said you cannot participate in politics and you have to remain confined to Ratnagiri. But his elder brother, Babarao Savarkar, was one of the founders. Hedgewar was a acolyte or whatever you want to call it. Munje was his mentor. Munje
That's
was
right.
the one who had sent him to study in Bengal for his medicine, and he was his patron. And Hedgewar was really doing Munje's bidding. Munje himself was not directly involved by name, but you can see from the documents that Munje is very much involved in the whole enterprise that goes on from there. His private papers are there, and they show very clearly his continuous involvement with the RSS. So I think it's important to recognize that why is it being set up? It is not a political party. It's not a Muslim League or a Hindu Mahasabha, or it's meant to be a kind of so-called non-political. But by non-political, it's not that they're not interested in politics or don't have a political understanding. They are not to take part in the electoral politics.
That's right.
That is the distinction that is being made. Even now, when they say we are non-political, it means the RSS does not participate in elections. But RSS has its people in the BJP, just as it had its people in the Jansangh. It says it loans its people to the BJP. Usually the organizing secretary at many places is in the BJP. Today we are told many people in ministers' offices are from the RSS.
The Prime
So
Minister himself was part of the RSS,
the
till
RSS,
1987.
exactly. So many are from RSS
Mr.
background.
Mr. Vajpayee was also
Was from
in the
RSS.
RSS, and he was
Exactly.
the
So I think
editor of its official organ, the Panchanya.
that's right. And yet I think it's important to understand why they maintain their distance. Because this distance gives them the capacity to function in a different way. And it also absolves the political party of the responsibility of many of the actions which the RSS may be taking. Just as RSS has now become a hydra-headed body, it has VHP, it has Bajrang Dal, it has ABVP, it has trade unions, it has so many organizations.
Teachers' organizations.
Yeah. So those organizations, RSS also now as a parent body, is no longer responsible for what they do. So you can say maybe they are doing this, but I don't know. So that is a very different story, which sometimes you may like to go into when you
That is
take
a
up
different
the
thing, that
subsequent.
the RSS does not, legally exist in any form. It does not even have a bank account, in its form. It gets a lot of Guru Dakshina, but that comes as cash, and
It
not,
doesn't have any register of members,
not that I
for
am aware of.
example. So
Not that I am aware of.
when they say, for example, that so and so was not a member of the RSS, like when they claim that
No,
Godse
they
was
said
not a
the
member.
Godse had dropped out. He had stopped coming, so he was no longer part of that. But the point is that his mind was fed when he was a political infant by the RSS. So his basic indoctrination was in the RSS. Anyway, that Godse chapter is a completely different thing. We'll go in. Let's try to the national movement is also developing through the 1930s. We see
Sorry. Let
yeah,
me briefly answer your question on 1930. So
yes,
Hedgewar, what he does is he resigns from the
RSS
Sarvatam Sanchalak, this thing, saying as a RSS head, I don't want to go into this movement.
right,
RSS should not officially join this movement. Very clear.
yes,
RSS individuals, if they want to join it individually, it's their responsibility.
right,
He does not tell them that you should join. And the explanation which is given for his joining is also very interesting, which is they say he's gone so that he can influence the youth who will be there in jail
right,
with the RSS ideology. That's the official explanation that is given within the RSS ranks as to why, if the RSS is not to join this movement, why has Hedgewar joined?
right.
But I think that
But he doesn't join the civil disobedience movement.
doesn't
Goes and
matter, but
joins
he
some local
satyagraha.
agitation. Yeah.
But see, the thing is, in people's eyes, if there's a movement going
Yes.
on,
Yes.
people are not going to ask who went to jail for this, who went to jail for
Right.
that. Like that, forest satyagraha was something that was started by communists also.
Right.
S.G. Sardesai, again in the same Maharashtra, in an interview, he told us how, as young people,
Listen.
when they heard Gandhiji give a call, everybody is free to now go on satyagraha.
Wherever there was a
Wherever it was
satyagraha going
possible,
on,
people went. That was the nature of the movement.
Exactly.
So obviously that he did not go as part of this or that is not relevant. He went to jail as part of a satyagraha, and people would think that he's gone as part of the Congress movement. And that is what I want to emphasize. I think the RSS has always been concerned about trying to establish their nationalist credentials, because they always project themselves as a nationalist organization. Their claim to fame, their claim to wanting the affections of the people, attracting the youth, is that we are a militant nationalist organization. Okay, we are the real fighters for nationalism. So you have to also maintain some veneer, some image of being, and this has helped. So whenever you ask, the first thing they would say, in a TV debate or something, the first thing that's thrown at you is Hedgewar went to jail. Yes. Savarkar went to Kala Pani. Yes. But much before he became a communist.
Became a published, writing their communal manifesto.
Yes, but after he left the Congress, he stopped work, And even in 1930, why did he not then say the RSS will join the movement? If they are genuine nationalists, why don't they join this movement? And the thing is that the
was
story
this?
goes on.
I'm sorry, just asking. Was this? Trying to separate itself from a political agitation, and this is a trait that we see even now. Even now, they say we are a cultural organization. They do not want to take any responsibility for what is being done by people who are trained under them, whether it was Nathuram Godse or whether it is Narendra Modi. I'm just talking about two absolute extremes. But the point is that they are not responsible for anybody who was part of their flock, so to say. Both Godse was part of the flock, and the others. We can actually count the number of cabinet ministers who have come up via the RSS Shakha network. It is there. But through the British period, so that do you think that they wanted to remain in the good books of the British? That is why they did not join anything which was happening in the name of Gandhi. So no civil disobedience, because the RSS is, delinked. It is Hedgewar in his personal capacity after stepping down from his position as the Sarsanchalak. So the RSS is absolutely clean. No action can ever be taken against the RSS. Is that the reason?
I agree with you completely. And I think to understand that, one has to look at their ideology, their stated written statements in their books and pamphlets and presidential addresses. I think it is so clear that they are very clearly not just critical of, but almost use abusive language for the Congress. They do not accept the Congress as a nationalist organization. They say it has actually decimated Indian nationalism. Gandhi, with his non-violence, has actually, what's that, defanged, the people of India by insisting on this. They are anti-Muslim, and they accuse the Congress of always appeasing Muslims.
And
They
weakening the Hindus is
of
also
appeasing
something which
and sorry
weakening,
and
weakening
weakening and
weakening the
sacrificing the interests of the Hindus.
right.
Actually sacrificing the interests of the Hindus. And Gandhi is in the forefront of this as well, they are concerned. And you can read Savarkar, you can read Golwalkar, Hedgewar. For the Muslims, of course, the kind of terminology used is unspeakable. It's difficult
Absolutely,
to even
absolutely.
repeat it in public. I mean, a person such as Hedgewar called them as Yavana snakes, of whom we should be very afraid. They put out a theory that the Muslims of India are going to unite with the Muslims of Central Asia and West Asia and all these countries, and the moment the British become weak or leave, they will come
They
and
will take over
reconquer it.
again.
So
Yes,
the thing is to build up a sense of insecurity and fear among the Hindus, because after all, to produce a communalized community, you have to create a sense of fear and insecurity. With this,
that
they
is
did
what they
through
are still
various,
doing at the moment.
which they are still doing at the moment by saying they had so many children, they will
Right.
have so many children. I mean, a community which is 14%, you are now telling Hindus that they will swamp you in a few years. And you have to be gullible to believe it. But people do believe it, isn't it?
Right.
People do
They
believe
do.
that things like 4 wives means more children. I mean, and all that. All the data can go. The data may show that declining
Right.
trend among Muslim, but this kind of thing goes on. So I'm saying at that time also, the reason that they would not participate in the national movement, Congress-led movements, Gandhi-led movements, the anti-imperialist movement which was going on, and obviously they would not participate in any movement led by communists like the peasant movement or by socialists like trade union movement. So it's not that they were anti-Gandhi because he was not militant enough, but they were followers of some other more
You
militant.
know, you
Did
know,
they did they follow Bhagat Singh? No. They were dead against socialism. They may now try to talk about revolutionaries and all that, but at that time, what was their attitude towards the revolutionaries who were there, who were going to jail,
right.
who were being hanged? What do we see? Do we see the
No,
RSS supporting these people?
let me draw your attention to a slightly, different phase a few years ahead. Let's look at the period after Savarkar is finally allowed to do politics.
Yeah.
1937 and after that. We see actually that is also the time when elections have been held. Congress was part of several governments, but there are problems, and eventually uh, the Congress steps out. So out of these governments, in some parts, there are elections in Bengal. Also, elections happen at that time. I'm now looking not at RSS just as RSS, but I'm looking at the entire combine of Hindu Mahasabha and various other people who share the similar kind of thoughts. I'm not using the label of Hindu nationalism, or nationalist, because of your opposition to that. But let's look at them as a fairly well knit but differently labeled groups. They also launch a movement, that is against the Nizam, and it becomes a fairly strong thing. Nathuram Godse is a participant in that, plays a fairly key role in that. Savarkar is actually playing a key role, guiding the whole thing. Now, at the time when there is serious deliberation going on within the Congress as to what now, especially with the war clouds looming ahead, Second World War appearing imminent, what does this show about this entire lot, which call themselves Hindu nationalists?
You mean they're launching the movement against the
Yeah,
Nizam?
okay, yeah. I'm just trying to understand.
You see,
Why do
it's
that?
very interesting
Yeah.
that this actually the state congress. There was a state congress, which is not a wing of the Indian National Congress,
Right.
because, as you know, Indian National Congress did not directly have branches
States,
in the Indian
state
states.
units. Yeah.
But there were a number of organizations such as the Riyasti Praja Mandals in many states, and in Hyderabad there was an organization called the State Congress.
And it was
which
not
was
part of British India at that time.
no, not at all. This
Yeah,
was
we need
In
to
the
tell this.
Hyderabad
We need
state,
to remind our
ha,
viewers, that it was
right,
not part of British
which was ruled by the Nizam.
by the Nizam. Yeah.
So now the Nizam was a very autocratic ruler, and he
Possibly.
also there was a strong element of suppression of Hindu rituals and Hindu religion. So there was that element
Despite
of
the fact that they were fairly significant in terms of numbers.
yes, but still there was the freedom to practice certain aspects and all that. There were all those tussles which were there. Now the state congress actually launched a satyagraha
Hmm.
against the Nizam at this time.
Right.
That's very interesting. At the same time, the Hindu Mahasabha RSS type of people, they enter this.
Right.
And they also start, as part of it separately, etc. So much so that then the state congress said that we don't want to be confused with this communal satyagraha led by RSS Hindu Mahasabha. So they actually withdrew their satyagraha, so that people don't get confused that
That
they are the
there's
ones who are, because clearly the RSS Hindu Mahasabha led satyagraha was spreading communal ideology, which the state congress was not. They were opposing the Nizam for his autocratic policies. They were opposing him because he suppressed Hindu religion, but not in a communal way. You see,
right.
not with a communal objective, whereas these people were clearly had communal objectives. So they separated themselves and even withdrew. This Swami Ramanand Tirath and all that, they were very big leaders of that movement at that time. They consciously separated themselves from this. So clearly, this was seen as a very communal movement by people at that time. That's very interesting.
True, and after that, we see the period of the 1940s. There
Yeah.
is, there are, I want to also try to understand the different responses to the British call for asking Indians to enlist in the army. From what I know, Savarkar was very keen that they should actually join the British army. There was one statement of his which he said, that I want Hindus to become part of the British army because so that they can develop themselves, they can actually learn the art of fighting. So this entire thing, to learn the art of fighting, know how to fight for their rights as Hindus. What does this show as against the ways in which there were slight disagreements within the Congress also about what kind of approach to be followed on the Second World War, whether to support the British at that particular time or not, or go along with what eventually the path Bose followed, Subhash Bose I'm talking about. I just want to understand to declutter all these things which are happening in the 40s before the call for the Quit India movement.
Yeah. So 1939 September, the Second World War breaks out.
Right.
And the Viceroy of India declares that India is a party to the war.
Right.
All right. Now, immediately the Congress reacts to this and says, how can you make India a party to the war without consulting us?
Right.
They were, after all, in the majority of the provincial governments, it was Congress that was ruling.
Right.
Apart from that, Congress was a major political party. And there were other political parties in India. So the whole idea that the people of India could become part of a war without any pretense even of consultation was something that was deeply offensive to the Indians. And
Right.
this was articulated by the Congress saying, you can't do this. So we are going to protest. The issue is not whether we support the ideals of the war or not, whether we are against fascism or not. Here
But
the
you
issue
have to
is
involve us in the
without
process of
taking
making
us
up our mind.
on board. We are not your chattels. This is a huge country. These people have a voice. You're talking now about accepting us as in the government, and now you suddenly turn around and you push us into a war without so much as a by your leave. So immediately the orders were given, all the provincial governments resigned, those led by the Congress. So the congressmen, they came out of the legislatures. So naturally new situation of a constitutional crisis came. because so many provinces were now without elected governments. Now, either they had to then go back to governor's rule, or some kind of cobbled coalition governments had to be put together in these states. Now, here's where the interesting story starts, even before your army business, where Savarkar comes forward and writes to the Viceroy Zetland and says, "We are willing to support you. We are willing to form governments with you for in these provinces. We are willing to form coalition governments. You take our support as given."
But
So
they did
first,
not have enough, legislators to be able to.
not enough to be able to form on their own, but like in three
In Bengal.
provinces,
Yeah.
they do join the coalition governments. In Bengal, for example, and there's Shama
Yes.
Prasad Mukherjee,
Yes.
who's very much there, in Northwest Frontier Province, and in Sindh.
Right.
The Hindu Mahasabha has a few legislators and they join these coalition governments. The issue is not how many they have, issue is of their policy. When the Congress is saying we are protesting on behalf of the Indian people, they are saying, here we are not with the
With the
Congress, we are
British.
with you. All right. So this is again what I was saying earlier. The logic of communal politics is loyalism. This logic comes out repeatedly. Then the story continues and Savarkar begins to justify. How does he justify this stand? One of the ways in which he justifies his stand is to say, even earlier in his presidential addresses, he's used this slogan, militarize Hindudom.
Right.
Hindus, and this is a what shall I say, a continuing refrain in this ideology that Gandhi is, feminizing Hinduism or whatever, and the whole masculine aspect of Hindu religion is what needs to be brought to the fore, and Hindus must be militarized. And this, he says, Hindus should join the army so that they learn how to fight. Again, the idea is get training to fight against whom? You're not going to join the army to fight against the British. So who are you to fight against? It's very clear that the war that will, once the British leave, there will be a war. And in that war, we need to be masculine and we need to be strong against whom? It's quite obvious who the enemy is. So these things are all part of the same scenario and they remain loyal collaborators of the British right through. Same for RSS. RSS does not support the Quit India movement. It doesn't. In fact, it uses the opportunity of the Congress people all being in jail from 42 to 45. Just as Muslim League uses this opportunity, all these communal forces use this opportunity where the political field is vacant to grow. RSS holds number of training camps. Godse himself organizes many. Others organize. There are, and in the British records, it is very clear there are many files because they are obviously keeping a watch on who is against the government and who is for the government and who they have to watch out as potential rebels. And they repeatedly say RSS is not going to give us any trouble. RSS is not joining Quit India. And they, in fact, there are records where the details of what is going on in the training camps of the RSS is given in the home political records, where what all they are teaching over there. All that is, we have all those details. So it's very clear the British knew exactly what RSS was doing, and they were very clear that they were not going to do anything against them.
So would you say, as we move to the final part of our discussion, conversation with you, that would you then say that contrary to what is claimed by the today's BJP, the government and the RSS, that they had absolutely nothing to do with the entire national movement, the entire freedom struggle, and all the time that they spent was to try to get the Hindus to organize themselves against the Muslims? That was the complete primary focus. Would you say that? And not just against the Muslims, but also those who talked about an inclusive India.
Absolutely. As I said, it is not only, in fact, their primary, if you see their, writings, there is the greatest venom and criticism is for the Congress. It's not
Directed
for
at.
the Muslim communalists. It's not for Jinnah. Even today, when you see what's being written in the textbooks on the partition, what is the focus? Yes, you will mention Jinnah as somebody who wanted partition, but the main focus is to show Congress accepted partition.
Right, because
Why
Nehru
did
was
the
in a hurry
Congress make?
to become
You
prime
say they
minister.
will not. They will not talk about the British role in the partition. After all, who are the rulers of India till 15th August 1947? If there was anyone calling the shots, it's the British. All the cards are in British hands. Jinnah
That's
has
right.
a veto. Because they've given him a veto power. What does the Congress have? Doesn't have really the power to decide anything. To go on about finally Congress accepted it. What does acceptance mean when you have no choice? And whether it was Vallabhbhai Patel or Jawaharlal Nehru or any other leader, Kripalani, who were all involved in the negotiations with the British, they repeatedly said, yes, finally we are saying yes because there is no choice. The only choice they kept on saying is civil war, and we don't want civil war. They were not willing for a majoritarian violent solution, which is what the RSS wanted, what the Hindu Maswa would have wanted. You keep the Muslims, under your heel through violence, prevent partition through violence. That was not the policy or edit of the Congress. It had never been, and that was not the kind of nation they wanted to build. No, that Congress had said very earlier, if a significant part of, and whether it was the issue of the states or whether it was the issue of the Muslim League, Congress was very clear. If a sufficient number of people want a certain thing, they can have it. You
That's
know,
right.
and what's wrong with that policy? It doesn't go against the notion of a humane nationalism. Nationalism doesn't mean you impose the ideas of the majority of the people, whether a linguistic majority or a religious majority or a political majority, on the others.
On the others, everybody has a certain.
Whatever be the nature of the minority. Nationalism means carrying everyone together to the extent you can. And if for some reason, some people at some point come to the conclusion they don't want to be part of that nation,
No,
I mean, there's damn all you can do about it.
yeah, I think you have put it very well that nationalism, this one sentence is actually a key takeaway. And we'd conclude at that point, that nationalism means being able to take all the people along with you all the time, not leaving out certain people that you're not part of it. And
Yes.
it's quite clear, by the discussions and by the forceful arguments which you have put forward, that through the entire period, right from 1925, even the decades prior to that, when the thoughts which actually led to the formation of the RSS in 1925, throughout the entire freedom struggle and even thereafter, in the early decades after India secured independence, they were not in any way involved in this, but they were actually pursuing their own divisive idea or agenda, whatever I would like to call it. Thank you very much, Professor Mridula Mukherjee, for explaining fairly lucidly, or at times quite vehemently, that the RSS had nothing to do with the freedom struggle, with the national movement of India. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Divan.